Good morning. Welcome to the Boardwalk Talk series brought to you by the aquarium at the Dauphin Island Sea Lab. My name is Mendel Graber. I am one of the educators here at the Dauphin Island Sea Lab, and we are here this morning at our marine mammal lab to chat with some of the folks who work with our Alabama Marine Mammal Stranding Network. This is Mackenzie Russell, our stranding coordinator, and Dr. Jennifer Bloodgood. Dr. Bloodgood is a PhD DVM, so she is both a research scientist and a veterinarian. So Mackenzie is going to tell us a little bit about the Stranding Network, and then Dr. Bloodgood is going to chat with us about the sperm whale that stranded in Mobile Bay in November of 2020. So with that, I am going to pass this over to Mackenzie and let her tell you a little bit about the work that they do with the Stranding Network.
Awesome. Thanks, Mendel. Well, I appreciate you guys all joining us today. I know you are probably pretty interested, and Dr. Bloodgood and I have, we're excited to tell you about a little bit more about the sperm whale that did strand live in Mobile Bay in November. Before we get there, though, just to kind of reiterate who we are and what we do. So, like Mendel said, my name is Mackenzie Russell, and I'm the stranding coordinator for the Alabama Marine Mammal Stranding Network. We are the state agency for marine mammal strandings, and what that means is that we respond to live, sick, injured, and deceased marine mammals in the entire state of Alabama, and that includes manatees, and we respond to manatees in Mississippi as well. So we are the agency that is working with NOAA as well as working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service under several different permits to be the people that are responding to these live marine mammals as well as deceased marine mammals in the state. So I'd like to point you here, we do have a 24/7 hotline. It's this simple phone number, 1-877-WHALE-HELP. And like I said, we are trained first responders. We do have our veterinarian, Dr. Bloodgood, on staff, and we are all trained in live and deceased marine mammal response. We also have a variety of equipment and all sorts of things like that we do respond to marine mammals with. So I'll just turn it over to Dr. Bloodgood to just make a brief introduction of what we'll be talking to you all about today.
Thank you, Mackenzie. So as Mendel mentioned, today we are going to talk about specifically the sperm whale that stranded inside Mobile Bay in November of 2020. If you guys remember, it was around Thanksgiving time in November. So we're going to talk about that animal today and the extraordinary response effort that our team had, as well as our necropsy or postmortem findings to date. And Mackenzie's going to start with a little bit of information about the natural history of sperm whales to get us all started on the same page.
Awesome. Thank you. You'll notice we'll be kind of passing the mic back and forth a little bit today as well. So trying to keep it, very conversational, and we've got a lot of good information to tell you. So a little bit of just generally about sperm whales. So sperm whales, as you can imagine, actually don't often inhabit Mobile Bay. So they are actually found in the Gulf of Mexico. There's suspected to be less than 800 that live solely in the Gulf of Mexico, and they primarily live in deep water. So they actually live off the continental shelf. Several hundred miles offshore, especially here in Alabama, because our continental shelf is pretty wide. So those animals are often living in deep water, and they're encountering very few of each other because there's not that many here in the Gulf of Mexico. They were also once hunted with whaling that used to happen, especially here in the Gulf of Mexico as well as worldwide. So because of that, these animals are actually endangered. So they are also marine mammals, which that means that they are federally protected by the Marine Mammal Protection Act. But because they're also endangered, they are also protected by the Endangered Species Act. So sperm whales are very, very specially protected using multiple different federally groups in the U.S. here. So everything that we did during this response, this was all in conjunction with the federal authorities who actually have these permits, and we're working in collaboration with them. So just to let everyone know that was a big part of our entire response for this as well. And I will say that only about 2 sperm whales strand each year in the Gulf of Mexico, so it's a very, very low number. And they don't often strand live as well. So having a live stranded large whale like this, this was actually the first time in history, that in recorded history for here in Alabama, that we had a live sperm whale inside Mobile Bay. Now, we do sometimes see deceased sperm whales wash up actually as bones. So if we want to maybe come over here, we do have a suspected sperm whale vertebrae, which is what this is. So this actually washed up many, many decades ago. And we do also have other bony parts that have washed up from suspected sperm whales as well. So this sperm whale that happened in November, that was a very rare instance for the first live sperm whale that we've ever had. And a great comparison is looking at this is a bottlenose dolphin vertebrae, comparing just how small it is to something that we suspect is from a sperm whale. So very different.
Could you give a size estimate on that bottlenose dolphin just for comparison?
Yes, I'm actually going to turn that over to Dr. Bloodgood. She's done the math on this, so I'd love to have her share that with you.
All right. Thanks, Mackenzie. Great question, Mendel. So what we actually decided or talked about was that sperm whales in general, the females, can get up to about 35 feet, while the males can actually reach 60 feet. So they are incredibly large. The whale that stranded inside Mobile Bay, that vertebra wasn't from that one, but he was estimated to be 33.5 feet, which is actually as long as a school bus, or it was 6 times my height. So we have a little graphic here just depicting exactly how long the sperm whale was that stranded inside the bay compared to the school bus and an average size human. We also know that this animal weighed over 30,000 pounds. So it was quite large. That's actually more than a school bus weighs. It's about 1.5 times an empty school bus with no people inside. And it's about 200 times my weight, which I won't tell you. But the average size dolphin that vertebra probably came from, an adult could be 7 to 9 feet or so. So only about a third or less the size of the sperm whale that was in the bay. We also wanted to talk a little bit about sperm whale diet. As Mackenzie said, they're normally very deep diving animals. They live off the continental shelf, with that, they eat very deep diving species. So their diet consists primarily of things like squid and sharks even, and skates, and other fish. And here you can see a photo of, if you just Google what sperm whales eat, this is what will come up. This is a sperm whale eating a giant squid. So you can see its tentacles wrapped around its mouth, and that's actually how they capture them and eat them. So now I'm going to pass it back to Mackenzie, who's going to switch into the monitoring effort for this sperm whale.
We have a question, Mackenzie.
Awesome.
And this probably will tie in well with what you're about to explain. I know
Perfect.
You guys have a lot of information to get through, so you're moving through relatively quickly, but if you could answer this.
We love the questions.
Greg asks, when you say trained in marine mammal response, what does that mean?
What a great question. Thank you for that question. So it actually takes a lot to be a trained marine mammal responder. So we have to know how to operate our equipment, which we have a lot of, like I said, and it's very specialized equipment. We have a vessel that we utilize as well for for marine mammal response. And we have a lot of training. So we go through a lot of trainings, specifically with our NOAA colleagues, who we actually have a stranding agreement through.
Can you explain what NOAA is?
Sure.
Or just explain what the acronym is.
Yes, it's the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. So that is actually in the Department of Commerce. So they regulate a lot of the fisheries, and they do the weather, things like that. So because marine mammals fall under the Fisheries Service, that's actually why they're through NOAA. So we work with them quite often. Again, they are the ones that are holding the permit for endangered species as well. So everything with this whale went through that endangered species permit that they have. So that's a great question. We have a great team here as well, and we know how to respond to live animals as well as deceased, so we know how to safely get animals on and off the beach, as well as drive our equipment and things like that. And then we of course have Dr. Bloodgood, who's a trained marine mammal veterinarian, so then we're also able to respond to those live animals and do necropsies, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a little while, for marine mammals to try to figure out why they stranded. It's a great question. So let's go a little bit more into depth on exactly what happened with this specific case. So this stranded sperm whale in Mobile Bay. So obviously marine mammal strandings, especially live animals, they happen for a reason. So primarily these animals strand because they are critically ill. There's something wrong that has caused them to strand. Now in this case with this animal was actually reported in by somebody who was just out on their boat inside Mobile Bay and called our 1877 number, the 1877 whale help number, to report an animal that they knew they'd never seen before and they thought it was odd to see in the bay. So right after that, we were able to monitor the animal and actually go out and put eyes on the animal. We utilized a lot of different agencies to assist us with this response, and this is actually a graphic of all of those various agencies, so state agencies, federal agencies, volunteer groups, like the Coast Guard Auxiliary and different marine mammal stranding groups throughout the entire northern Gulf of Mexico. So we worked with our stranding partners as well. So now I'd like to kind of share with you the locations of where this animal stranded. So we do have an infographic that I can show. So this animal was first reported on the 19th of November inside Mobile Bay, and it then on the day after that was seen in the southern part of the bay. 2 days later, it was seen up in the northern portion of the bay, and then 2 days after that, the next 2 days, it was seen over on the western side of the bay. So this animal was unfortunately all over inside the bay. So we really needed to make sure that we were working with all of our colleagues, because this was a case of a hazard, a very sick, a critically sick animal that was inside the bay that was estimated to be 35 feet long, that potentially was posing a hazard to navigation as well as people on the water. So we were really concerned about that as well, and the safety of just everyone involved. We really needed to make sure that the safety of our staff, every agency working with us, that was definitely a critical part of this as well. And keeping in mind that this is an animal, like Dr. Bloodgood said, that weighs near 30,000 pounds. So every time that animal was actually stranded, all of that weight that has never felt weight before was actually sitting on the ground. So you can imagine that actually was doing a lot of harm to that animal's body every single time that it's stranded. And stranding multiple times like that is just hard in general on an animal as well, especially one that was already compromised and obviously sick.
In speaking to the areas that it's stranded, what is the depth of water that it was basically moving through?
That's a great question. So the average depth of Mobile Bay is only about 10 feet deep. And again, keeping in mind when we look at our schematic again of an average size human, that whale was not navigating through much water at all. So it makes a lot of sense that animal was continuously restranding because the bay is very, very shallow, and especially in all of these areas. It was shallow enough for the whale, but again, keeping in mind that we really had to be cautious about safety for people and our staff and equipment and things like that as well during all of this as well. So now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Bloodgood, and she's going to give you her medical evaluation of this animal when it was being monitored inside the bay.
And this might be part of your story that you're working on for later, but you do have an image of the whale, and you can kind of see how shallow the water is. I don't know if you want to point that out.
Exactly. This is actually the image I was going to point to next, and that's a good point, that it does show you just how shallow these parts of Mobile Bay where the animal was stranding are. So the animal is about 6 feet tall, and the water level here is 4 to 5 feet in this particular stranding location. What I did want to point out from this photo is that this is one of the early days where Mackenzie and I actually went out and we were able to cover the animal with these white sheets. It's a little bit difficult to tell what they are, but they are your basic bed sheets. And this is a critical early thing that we can do to protect them from sunburn. So you don't actually think about that very often because they live outside, they live in the water, but something when they're exposed above the water abnormally like this, they're very susceptible to sunburn, and this animal was experiencing some blistering from the sun, so we were able to cover it early on to help protect it from the sun. We also, it's difficult to tell from this photo, but the animal was very emaciated or very, very thin. So early on, we knew that something was not right with this animal, and that he had not been doing well for quite some time to become this skinny. So we knew right away that things weren't going well and that the prognosis was not good for many reasons with this animal. But we did not take the decision to euthanize him lightly. As a veterinarian, euthanasia is something we take an oath to protect animals and to ease their suffering when deemed necessary. And I personally spoke with people from all over the country, from NOAA, as we talked about earlier. We had our network collaborators here, including a second veterinarian from the Institute for Marine Mammal Studies, or IMMS, in Mississippi. So this decision was not made lightly, but the prognosis for this animal was really poor. And so we did decide that the most humane option was to euthanize him. This, because of safety, as Mackenzie also mentioned, we knew early on, however, we were not able to safely administer the euthanasia until the 25th of November, which was the 7th day of stranding. If you've ever euthanized a pet and been present during that time, it's a similar process. We were able to give him muscle relaxants and anti-anxiety medications and painkillers to help ease that passage. So we felt truly like we did the right thing for this animal. And he was there for about 7 days, unfortunately. But because of the euthanasia, we did decide to do a necropsy, which basically is an animal autopsy, or kind of like CSI, where you're trying to find out why the animal stranded. We actually have a graphic here about necropsies and why we do them. So basically figuring out why the animal was sick and why he's stranded. And Mackenzie is going to briefly talk about the sort of goals of a necropsy and show some of our spaces and PPE that we use.
PPE has gotten to be a familiar acronym, but
yes,
for anyone who's not calling what PPE is, can you?
Yes, so we will actually give you a little gander. We've got a very great volunteer, actually our assistant stranding coordinator, Christina, is modeling actually the PPE, or the personal protective equipment, that we utilize during this necropsy. So obviously we're going to take a quick look into our necropsy lab. So this animal would not have been able to fit inside this lab, and Christina is demonstrating the safety measures that we took because we did have to do the necropsy for this animal outside. So normally we would have animals that would come in here like a bottlenose dolphin, and they would fit in this room just fine. But unfortunately for this animal, it was just not the case. It was just too large. But you can see that Christina is actually wearing what we wore during this necropsy, with boots, a Tyvek suit, mask, goggles, and then those gloves on her hand are actually knife safety gloves, so that would prevent any knives from cutting the hands. Awesome. Thank you, Christina. What a great model. So because we weren't able to do the necropsy of this animal, which again, like Dr. Bloodgood said, was really to find out the reason for this animal stranding in the first place, and why this animal was presenting the way that it was, very sick and critically ill. Those are our standard procedures when it comes to necropsy. But because we couldn't do it here at our facility, we actually ended up setting up this kind of field necropsy suite, is what we like to call it. So we had various tents, and we had areas where we were storing samples, areas where we were taking samples. As you can see, everyone was in masks and wearing proper gear for whichever situation they were in, whichever area of the field that they were in. So this was really, really important because, again, human safety was always going to be our number one, and it was really, really important to us that everyone stayed safe. And especially, during this time of a large whale stranding, which again happened to be the first live large whale stranding in Alabama. So a very historic event. So again, our goal was to try to find out why this animal stranded, why this animal was so far out of its habitat as well. Because again, like we talked about multiple times now, this animal they don't live in Mobile Bay, so it was determined to be out of habitat, and we wanted to find out why. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bloodgood, and she's actually going to go through some of our findings with you all, which I'm sure a lot of people are curious about.
Thank you, Mackenzie. So two of the most basic parts of a necropsy or animal autopsy are the external exam and the internal exam. So we're looking both physically at the external characteristics and any lesions or spots on the animal, and then also looking internally at every organ to determine if there's any pathology or anything wrong going on. So one of the biggest findings actually externally was a photo identification match for this animal. And for anyone who's not familiar with it, photo ID is where you can take a photo of an animal. With dolphins, we use the dorsal fin. With the sperm whale, they actually use the flukes or the tail. And this animal had a photo ID match, which means its tail had previously been photographed, actually back in 2012. And you can see the photo here. The top image is from the 2012, and you can actually see, especially all of the red arrows are indicating areas of defects or slight abnormalities that can result from many things, but that is what is actually used to compare and confirm a match. So here you can see especially this large notch here matches the photo from the animal's autopsy here in this photo. So this animal was confirmed to have been sighted in 2012, which is super interesting. And to the right of this image, we actually have a map of where that initial sighting was. So this is us up here in Mobile Bay, and down here, this pin is where the animal was sighted. It's about 200 kilometers off the coast of Florida there. So you can see it's right near the continental shelf, which is where Mackenzie was mentioning that they actually live in deeper waters far offshore. So this would have been a normal place for this animal to be.
Can you quickly point out the edge of the continental shelf and give a brief description of what that means?
Would you like to do that, Mackenzie?
Sure, yeah, if you can hear me. So this, you can see this lighter blue that's closer to the land. That's actually all the continental shelf. So that's just essentially an extended area of shallower water that the continent is kind of, sitting on. So that land is closer to the surface of the water. And then right out here where it gets deeper, that's actually where that shelf is, that slope is, it drops off to that deeper water. And that's where sperm whales like to live, because again, that's where a lot of their food lives as well.
So thank you, Mackenzie. So this animal was previously photo ID'd in a normal habitat for him. And we actually know as well that he was with other members of the sperm whale group. So he was with other sperm whales at that time, which is also really interesting. And we can definitely talk about that more later if you guys would like. But to move more into our findings, we do have some of the external exam findings for you here. These photographs show the skin of the animal, and if Mackenzie can actually point out, some of these white rings are actually squid markings. So if you recall the earlier photo of the sperm whale eating a giant squid, these are markings that would occur from the squid's suckers that are along their tentacles. So he did have, here's that previous photo. So you can actually see in this photo, this sperm whale has some markings from squid. So he did have some of those markings, which was very interesting. They're not any problem for them at all. It's just an interesting finding and confirming that he likely ate some pretty large squid in his time. Unfortunately, moving into that internal exam, we do know that he had not eaten in quite a long time. So we suspected that due to, from this photo and from our monitoring, we suspected that the animal hadn't eaten in some time because of the level of emaciation or skinniness. But we were able to confirm that because the stomach contents. So if you focus on this picture here, this is a photo of everything that came out of the forestomach of this animal. So Whales and other cetaceans are very interesting. They have multiple stomachs or stomach compartments. So the fourth stomach is an area where they can retain some hard parts. You can find them throughout the digestive tract, but this animal had retained over 100 squid beaks, but they can stay in there for quite a long time because they are hard, similar to cartilage. And then this animal also had some pieces of suspect carapaces or crab shells in the stomach as well. But we were able to confirm that it had been quite a long time since this animal had eaten, because not only did we find an empty stomach except for hard parts. Oh, actually, I almost forgot. We have some very interesting actual specimens of the squid beaks. So these are ones that actually came out of this animal's stomach. So you can see just exactly what they look like. So we were able to confirm, however, that it had been a very long time since this animal had eaten, or at least eaten well, because when we opened the animal, we found a lot of fluid inside the abdomen, and one of the most common reasons this can result is actually from a lack of protein in the blood and from not eating. So we did blood work, which is, if you've been to the doctor, one of the most common, very first things you can look at to decide what is going on with an animal or human. And based on the blood work findings, we were able to confirm that the animal had not eaten in a long time because of the low protein, and then also that fluid in the abdomen.
You mentioned that was the stomach contents, but notably it was also missing like the soft tissue.
Yes.
Right, so that was the extent of what you found, and the absence of the soft tissue was another indication.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. We only found hard parts, which means it had been long enough for all the soft tissue to be digested, and all that was left were these hard, sort of cartilaginous, or mostly like cartilage parts. So yes, just confirming the extent of time that it had been. Also, on the animal's blood work, we were able to see that he had respiratory compromise, or he was having difficulty breathing. And this goes with what Mackenzie was saying earlier, having stranded in 4 different locations, their body weight being so massive that when they strand, they are actually basically crushing their lungs, and they can't expand as much as they need to and breathe the way that they need to be able to. Because these are mammals, they need to be able to breathe air. They're not fish. They can't breathe in the water. They have to surface to breathe. But when they're on land like this with part of their body out of the water, they can't breathe the way that they need to because they're so heavy. So we did see on the blood work that the animal was having some difficulties with breathing. We also saw a bit of an inflammatory response. This can happen for many reasons, including things like infections, but we didn't find any evidence of an infection, so it's not clear where that inflammatory response was coming from. One of the things that we can do beyond blood work that we did was histology, which is looking at all the tissues under a microscope, and we work with collaborators to do this. But basically on histology, they were able to confirm that the animal was emaciated, had very depleted blubber stores, which is why it looks so skinny in this picture, and also had fatty liver, which, alternative to what you might think, you think fatty liver must mean fat. It's actually that the animal is storing fat in its liver because it's depleting it from other places because it hasn't eaten in a long time. So we know that this was a chronic condition and that this animal was not doing well for a long time.
With the histology, when you talk about the tissue samples that
Yes.
you take, if you were to use your arm to or show, like, how deep is this piece of tissue that you take?
That's a good question. So it depends on the organ that we're looking at. So inside the whale, it's very deep. Arm length inside the whale would be to get to, say, its lungs or its stomachs. We had to go many inches into the whale. And then
now that is postmortem.
This is postmortem. Yes, ma'am. Good point. We don't typically do histology on living animals unless it's as small as a biopsy. If you've ever had a liver biopsy before, that can happen while you're still alive. But these things that we did were all postmortem, so the animal had already been euthanized, and we were able, though, for that reason, to sample every organ that we were able to find. So we sampled almost everything, and the samples, though, are very tiny. So you take a small piece of the organ, and then it's sectioned to an even smaller piece. It's 5 microns by the time it's looked at under a microscope. So it is literally microscopic, which is great, though, because what I can see at a larger scale is just the overall organ, and I can look at the insides and determine if there's anything I can see with my eye. But then we also go that extra step and look at the microscopic level to see if there are changes.
So can we go back for just a second and ask for clarification on something? So you said that there were a number of, or you said that you didn't see evidence of an infection?
Yes.
But for clarification, the inflammation may have been evidence of infection, or it could have been something else, but
right.
You tested specifically for a number of infectious agents and didn't confirm any of the ones that you tested for.
Precisely. So inflammation can have many, many, many causes, only one of which would be infectious. But just in case, we did test for lots and lots of infectious diseases. So we did a full suite of fungal, viral, and bacterial testing, and made sure we tested also for 2 of the most common diseases seen in the Gulf of Mexico, which are morbillivirus and brucella, which is a bacterial disease. All of these tests were negative for this animal. So we didn't confirm that it had an infection. There are lots of infections that we were not able to test for because there's just so many in the world, but we tested for as many as we could, and all of those were negative. So good question. But basically, based on our visual assessment, external exam, the histology, the blood work, we confirmed that this animal was extremely emaciated and had not been well for some amount of time. We did not find any evidence, so we look for the most common reasons that animals may strand, including trauma, vessel strikes, fisheries interaction, or entanglement. None of these, we had no evidence of any of these, which is actually really good news. So we can look at this in a positive light, that we did not find evidence of trauma either from pond specifics, which would be animals of the same species, or other species. No evidence of boat strikes, so that's actually a real positive. We didn't find any evidence that humans caused this. We're still looking into many possibilities as well, so we're not done yet. It's been several months, but these things, because of closures and COVID and just the time it takes to look at these things, we're still planning to look at contaminants. Things are in the works for biotoxins. So we found no evidence of marine debris ingestion, no plastics, if people are wondering about that. Didn't find any of that in the animal's stomach. We will do some testing for contaminants, though, to confirm. So things are still in the works, but the primary findings for this animal were that he was extremely emaciated and had been that way for quite a long time. So, yes.
We did have a question from Matt. How big were his teeth?
Oh, that's a great question. So Mackenzie actually has a casting here. So this is not a real sperm whale tooth. It's just a casting or a replica, but it just shows you just how big. Do we actually know how big the animal was that the tooth?
This one was from a subadult male sperm whale.
Okay, so a subadult male, which would be probably about the size, maybe a little smaller than this whale. And you can see how it compares to a bottlenose dolphin tooth as well. So an interesting fact is that these sperm whales actually typically only have teeth in their lower jaw. They have no teeth in their upper jaw. It's very rare for those teeth to erupt. So when you see a photo of a sperm whale, it should only have teeth in the bottom jaw to be accurate.
It's kind of interesting how small the mouth of a sperm whale is compared to the size of the animal.
It's very interesting.
As you mentioned that, there's teeth on the bottom, only the bottom jaw. That's interesting also.
It is. So their head is all of this. Their head is over a third of their body, and the reason they're called sperm whales is because of this really interesting organ in their head called the spermaceti organ, and that's where they get their name from. But that is what, as Mackenzie mentioned earlier, they were hunted for years and years ago, was some of that oil that comes from the spermaceti organ.
Ambergris.
And that's different, yeah.
Yeah, so ambergris too is another reason they were hunted. So ambergris is a really interesting, I don't think the physiology of how it really happens is totally worked out even, but you may have heard of it because it's used in like perfumes and things like that. But basically we think that it is caused by beaks and other hard parts from animals that the sperm whales eat, being in the digestive tract, and it's secreted as a protectant so that the beaks can't hurt their GI tract. So it creates these concretions or stones of what is called ambergris, and the beaks are found inside of that. So, but people occasionally will find them on the beach after they're passed, or at necropsies, and they used to be worth a lot of money, and it's one of the reasons that whales were hunted, because of their use in perfumes, which sounds strange, but it's true. But now we have synthetic alternatives, so thankfully they're not worth as much now.
We have another question. Is it possible the very active 2020 hurricane played any role in the whale being displaced from its normal habitat?
It's a great question, and something that we definitely have considered. So hurricanes and weather patterns like that can disturb the whale's navigation abilities and lead to things like this. So it's definitely possible. It's not something that we were able to test for at this time, unfortunately. That's a great question, though. Yeah. Here, I'll let you.
Sure, just to kind of, and we'll take as many questions as we can, but just to end on kind of a reminder, another note, but again, we are the state agency for marine mammal stranding, so any live, sick, injured, or deceased marine mammals we care about. We care about all of them. So again, I would just like to recommend saving our number in your phones if you ever spend any time out on the beaches or in the waterways. And again, this is a great example of, it doesn't have to be in the Gulf of Mexico. It can also be in Mobile Bay, even in the river systems, things like that, because we do respond to manatees as well. Just save our number. It's 1-877-WHALE help. It's very easy to remember, and we really appreciate it, and love being able to help the animals and find out exactly what's going on and better protect every marine mammal in the Gulf.
So what you learn from situations such as this with a sperm whale stranding or your dolphin strandings or the manatees, that all of the calls that you receive, how does this help in protecting these animals or helping these animals in future situations? I think how do you use what you learn?
It's an awesome question. I can at least talk about it from the stranding coordination side of it, and then I'll definitely hand it over to Dr. Bloodgood for the medical side. Obviously, for the stranding network side of it, a lot of this has to do with collaboration. So being able to work together as a team, again, with all of these agencies, making sure that everyone is aware of that marine mammals live here, and that there are ways that we are able to assist them and respond to them and things like that. I think that's a very important lesson, and especially for this being the first large whale live stranding in Alabama, we had a lot to learn and a lot of agencies to connect with and things like that. So I think in the future we will be, we're already really well prepared, and I think that kind of collaboration and connection is really huge. That the next time this happens, or gosh forbid, anything like this happens in the future, we'll be prepared.
So one thing that I would like to point out, just for those who are watching, is that there's a lot left to be learned about sperm whales, about the sperm whale population in the Gulf of Mexico, because that population has been seen to have some differences from other sperm whale populations in other parts of the world. So this is still, an area of emerging research, and there's still a lot to be learned. And it's a long process to research these animals because of the limited interactions with them. So I don't know, I just wanted to make that point, but if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I'll speak to that. I know Mackenzie mentioned earlier that these animals are endangered and that there's only a couple 100,000 left in the world. And actually in the Gulf of Mexico, they estimate that there's less than 800. So there's not that many out there. And as Mendel mentioned, they are a unique population. So sperm whales in general, they migrate and they live as far north as the Arctic and as far south as the Antarctic. But we know that our animals here in the Gulf of Mexico are kind of unique in that the females at least really don't migrate. They stick around here. And the males, they're not as sure. They think that sometimes they do exit and come back because there are some genetic linkages between here and the Atlantic population. But they think that for the most part, they also actually stick around here. So there's a lot to learn about our population here still. Specifically this animal, we were able to find out that he was an adult. He had an active testicle, so we knew that he was an active adult, but he was very young to be an adult. So we
asked a question that kind of dovetails with what you're talking about right now. What was the estimated age?
That's exactly what I was going to say. That's a great question. So we estimate, the really interesting thing about having the photo identification early on, being from at least 9 years ago, and then the fact that he had an active testicle, so he was a late subadult. He had hit puberty at least. So we estimate that he was actually at least probably 12 years old, could be as old as 20, so somewhere in that age range.
And then at what age are the males considered to be fully reproductively
It's
adult?
a great question and kind of unique in sperm whales. The males actually they theoretically are adults as early as around this whale's age. So he had an active testicle, which means he could reproduce, which is how we define an animal as being an adult. They can reproduce. However, they actually don't typically reproduce. Sperm whales don't, the males, until they're around 50 years old. So much older than the time where they hit puberty, which is around 20. Alternatively, the females, though, as in their 30s, will be active reproducers.
How will we find out?
Oh, yes, great question. So something unique, Mackenzie grabbed that tooth replica again, and a really cool way that we can actually define and know for sure, or at least much closer, how old this animal was is tooth growth layers. So they actually deposit layers in their teeth as they grow, and we can look at these microscopically and determine how old this animal was, kind of like the rings of a tree. So we plan to do that with this sperm whale to get a more accurate estimate of how old he was.
Are you ready for another question?
I can
still talking about the Gulf population.
The basics of that is that there's so much that we are learning from a situation like this. It's a horrible negative thing that happened for this animal, but he will contribute to the greater science, and we will learn more about the species because of it.
So I noticed, and some other folks might notice, that you a number of times said they still have questions about the male, whether they're migratory or resident populations. So I was going to say maybe you're using they because there are people who study sperm whales a lot more than you all do, because you don't have that, they're not present in this part of the world, and you all study dolphins and manatees a lot more than you come into contact with sperm whales.
Right.
So, there are people who are actively researching sperm whale populations. And so there are still, even for those folks who spend a lot of time researching the sperm whales, who, there are a lot of questions left, but, you all have at this point, contributed to that body of knowledge about the sperm whales in the Gulf of Mexico and sperm whale populations.
Perfectly spoken. Yes, there are active researchers from NOAA and other organizations working on sperm whales in the Gulf. So, especially when I said they about the populations, they're actually biologists and other veterinarians too who work with other organizations are actively monitoring. So, like the photo ID is a great example. That's not our organization. We do photo ID here in Mobile Bay with dolphins primarily. But another organization has already started this, and that's NOAA, the federal organization for sperm whales in the Gulf of Mexico. So that would be one example of a day where the greater collaboration for continuing knowledge for these animals in the wild. Yeah.
So another question was the whale brought on land to take the samples? What happens to the animal after you take your samples?
Yes, that's a great question. The animal was brought to land. So you can do these autopsies or the necropsies in water, but it's very, very difficult. And inside Mobile Bay, it just wasn't feasible. So we were able to bring this animal to shore, take it to a remote location, which is the photo that Mackenzie shared earlier, of where the autopsy was done. So it was in a location in the middle of sort of nowhere, I guess you'd say, in Alabama, where we were far away from things, but thankfully close enough to emergency hospitals and things if we needed it. But the actual necropsy, all the samples were taken on land, yes.
So just let's go back for a second
Okay.
to the timeline. So there was a question, how was the whale euthanized? You did describe that as being like the process that would happen in a vet's office.
Mm-hmm.
But that was done before the whale was towed to land.
Yes.
So could you just kind of clarify that?
Yes. So first of all, we would never tow the animal alive. So it was after the animal had been euthanized that it was taken to land.
Why would you never tow it alive?
So the reason for that is because veterinarians from all over the world at this point have recognized that the potential to injure the animal is very, very high. You are most likely to essentially break the animal's back. You'll break its vertebrae if you try to tow such a heavy animal. And that's the primary reason for me from a veterinary standpoint, but also safety of our team. This animal, as I mentioned, weighs 200 times as much as I do and is as long as a school bus. So it may have seemed docile to some people, but it's a very dangerous thing to be around a whale this big. And if we were to tow it, it could have become very dangerous very quickly if it had been done when it was alive.
So for two very important reasons, you would not try to tow the whale for the health of the whale, because that could have caused a critical injury that it would never have recovered from.
Exactly.
Likely. And also for the safety of the people who work.
Exactly. And that's not to mention the very basic, as Mackenzie mentioned earlier, just never pushing an animal back out to sea, even if it's a dolphin that's on the beach that you come by. If it's alive, don't push it back out. Call for a trained marine mammal biologist or veterinarian to help to assess the animal, because 99% of the time they strand because they're very, very sick, and it is documented that if you push them back out, it'll seem successful, and you've probably all seen videos of successful pushing back into the water, but most of the time they actually just come back a few days later, and it's prolonging the suffering of the animal. So it's actually a really unfortunate thing when people push them back.
So we should say, when we look at the map of how many times he's stranded, this shows that he was restranding himself because he was not able to go.
Correct. Yes, he was not able. We do think that the tides played a large role in dislodging him and the movement that he made. We don't think that he was actively trying to leave because we know for sure that he was very sick, emaciated. So
let's re-emphasize that you all work in partnership with the federal agencies that regulate the laws surrounding animals that are protected by the Marine Mammal Protection Act and the Endangered Species Act. So it's not just anyone who can respond and evaluate and make decisions, and you wouldn't just call anyone. There
Exactly.
are people who are
Okay. I'm going to let Mackenzie take this one. I will say, from a veterinary standpoint, I am not even allowed to make that ultimate decision on my own to euthanize this animal. It has to go through the federal authorities. So in the moment when this decision was made and we were going through with euthanasia, we actually had to be on discussion with veterinarians and biologists, with NOAA and other agencies from across the country. So it's not something that it just happens. It's a very serious thing that we don't take lightly at all.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that too, for the monitoring that we were out with the animal and making sure that we had the proper permission and proper protocols. We were constantly in contact with the NOAA law enforcement officers as well. So NOAA does actually have a law enforcement side of that agency as well as U.S. Fish and Wildlife. They also have a law enforcement division as well. So that's a really, really critical piece of this, as well as that any interaction, any harassment of a marine mammal is illegal. So and harassment is defined as anything that would change their behavior. Obviously, this was a very, very interesting and different case, but it's the same thing as feeding dolphins. Obviously, that is harassment and is illegal. Same with watering manatees, things like that. So this is we do everything under multiple permits. There's a lot of paperwork involved, and especially something like this, that it both falls under the Endangered Species Act as well as the Marine Mammal Protection Act. So law enforcement we were in contact with, and we worked exclusively with the state law enforcement conservation officers as well. That was a big part of it, making sure we were keeping the public safe, as well as making sure the animal was had a perimeter and things like that too.
And to clarify, that's true for dolphins, manatees. So
yes.
While this was a very unusual event, if any of our viewers, in the future, it's very unlikely to see another sperm whale, but this is also true for dolphins, manatees, all marine
Definitely,
mammals.
yes, and that's really, really important. Our big thing is keep wild dolphins wild. We want to make sure that they are, protected and given distance. Nobody should be chasing manatees or chasing dolphins, feeding them, watering them. Like I said, all of that is really, really critical. And picking up after yourself too. It's just as simple as that. There's little things that you can do that keep these animals safe, and things like making sure that you're stashing your discarded fishing line. It's very possible that, especially dolphins that live in and around our waters, they can actually get entangled in that fishing line, and that poses a huge risk to them as well.
And true for stranded dolphins as well.
Yes, that's when we say we work with sick, injured, and deceased marine mammals, those injured animals are those entangled animals. That's a lot of what we work with, and vessel strikes, things like that. So just making sure, giving them distance, you're not feeding them, you're not watering them, and you're just picking up your trash too. Ingestion is a big problem as well.
So we had another question. We were talking about the age of this individual and how you estimated the age, but we had a couple of follow-up questions. What's the average lifespan of this species, or how old can they live to be?
That's a good question. From what I think I've read, it's about 80 years. But again, there's still a lot of questions that we still have. So I think from a few things that I've read, it's about 80 years. But obviously, if they're just starting to be mature and reproduce at age 50, who knows? I mean, there are whales out there that they estimate can live to be 200 years old in different species. So there's a lot of questions, but it's about 80 years old.
Did you know how those estimates were arrived at for the
teeth? Yep. So they use, that's a pretty common technique to age marine mammals, is using the teeth. So that is that what has been used in the past as well. And we're actually working with the people that did that. So to age this animal's teeth as well. Yeah.
So they would take those teeth from deceased sperm whales,
yes,
and section them and sample them, and over time, after collecting a number of these teeth, they would estimate the lifespan.
Yes, and a big kind of, asterisk on that too is, again, I think I mentioned earlier, only about 2 sperm whales strand a year in the Gulf of Mexico. So obviously in other parts of the world you can have different situations where they'll have mass strandings of sperm whales, so it'll actually be many, many that will strand even at a time. But here in the Gulf of Mexico, like Dr. Bloodgood was saying, we think we have a pretty unique population. So it's very possible too that these animals are actually about 1 meter to 2 meters shorter than the worldwide average of sperm whales as well. So the population that this one likely came from is potentially different.
That's
so we're trying to find that out.
This may be completely unrelated. Maybe you'll have an opinion or know something about it, but a lot of animals that live in cold water tend to live longer and they tend to grow larger. Is there any idea? I mean, I'm just speculating here because I know that's true for some other kinds of animal species. Is there any idea that
surface area to body ratio?
Exactly.
That's, I'll hand it over.
Okay. If the population here is resident and they stay in the warm waters of the Gulf.
Right, so you would expect the animals here to be actually a little smaller than animals in the north because of that surface to body area ratio. So I think it's called Bergman's rule, that the animals will actually have a smaller surface area ratio, which means they are bigger, but their surface area is smaller in relation to their body size farther north, and that's so that they lose less body heat when it's cold. So you would actually expect animals closer to the equator to be a little bit smaller. It does get a little confusing when you have resident populations and then compared to animals that migrate. So I think there's a lot of questions still to be answered, but maybe you could speculate that our animals would be a little smaller because of that.
And it's important to keep in mind too that they're mammals, right? So mammals they're just like us, they're endotherms. They create their own body heat, so they have to take care of that body heat. And animals that live in the water, that body heat gets taken away about 25 times faster in the water than it does in the air. So that's something that they always have to keep, they probably don't think about it too often, but they have to, that's an important part of where they live and their anatomy as well.
Another question from Matt: how long was the jawbone?
That's a great question. And actually, I would say that we don't entirely know. It would have been very, very interesting to do x-rays or radiology on this animal to look at all the bones. We do have a section of the jawbone that I would estimate is 4 or 5 feet long. But in reality, it's probably much larger. I kind of wish we had a printout of a skeleton now, but their jaw essentially goes all the way back to here.
So it's hidden within the tissue and the muscles.
Yeah, so this part that's open is actually only part of their jaw. The actual extent goes a little bit farther, so it's quite large.
Yeah, we took the part of the jaw that had the teeth.
Yes.
So there was a longer part that didn't have the teeth. So we were able to take the jaw that did have all the teeth.
So when was whaling made illegal in the United States? And I have a follow-up question to that too.
So I know that in these, with sperm whales, they do have records of them being whaled until 1987. But the Marine Mammal Protection Act was put into place in 1972. So. And
in most countries, whaling is illegal. It is still legal in some isolated incidents, or in some countries, or under certain arrangements. Are any of the like the bones or any of the remnants of whales that died because of whaling, because of hunting, have any of those been made available for research?
Oh, I'm sure. I know the Smithsonian has a very large collection, and they do have whales that were taken during whaling as well. I'm not sure about sperm whales specifically. I would bet my money on it. But I do know that they do have specimens that are there bone specimens that are there from whaling days. I would not be surprised. But as you can imagine, the storage for bones from a large whale like this is rather difficult. And at least in the Smithsonian, they have to have a separate campus with 2 warehouses that they stuck together, and so it's a lot. You just have to have a lot of space. I mean, especially if you think about this as one vertebrae in an entire, potentially up to 60-foot long animal, the space can be a critical part of being able to utilize those samples for investigatory research. But definitely possible. Cool question.
Mm-hmm.
There was a comment from Matt. There's a whaling museum on Nantucket with sperm whale specimens.
Yeah, that would make sense. There was a lot of whaling out of Nantucket.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Do you guys have anything that you feel like is kind of an important takeaway message to leave folks with? And we can put that. I know Mackenzie wants to be sure everyone knows that information. We can also put that in the comments or in the description.
That's true. We also, I don't know if you want to talk about the
we can also share, in case anyone hasn't seen it, there were updates posted during this event on the DISL news page.
We'll put it all together in one spot. We'll do an updated article.
Excellent. So Angela is going to amazingly put this all together for you guys so that it's easy to access and read, but it'll have lots of frequently asked questions as well as information from today's presentation in it.
And I do want to make one point. So the Dauphin Island Sea Lab, we're celebrating 50 years in 2021. But the Alabama Marine Mammal Stranding Network also has a special celebration.
Yes, it does. So we are actually celebrating our 10-year anniversary. So under our leadership of Dr. Ruth Carmichael, who started this program in 2011. So this is our 10-year anniversary as well. So we are going to be doing updates and things like that to our Facebook page and kind of where we've come from, where we are, things like that. So yeah, this is a very special year for the Stranding Network as well. So we've been here for 10 years and we're excited for the next 10 and the 10 after that and the 10 after that.
So I'd like to add to that you guys have done an amazing job building this program over the last 10 years. But before that, there was not a large concentrated effort to collect data on marine mammals in this area. There were sort of isolated efforts. And I know that you guys have kind of compiled those resources, that data. But before you all started the program 10 years ago, there was kind of a blank of kind of a paucity of information, of data.
Yeah, so Mendel doing her awesome thing over here. So we have put all of this information together. So strandings have been recorded in Alabama since 1978, but like Mendel said, it was very piecemeal up until about 1996. In the 1996 Spring Hill College, actually, many people, maybe if they're watching, may remember Father Regan did lead a stranding program there for about 10 to 15 years as well. So then once that kind of went away, then it really became the Dauphin Island Sea Lab as the lead stranding response. And like I said, we respond to all marine mammals here in the state of Alabama, and then as well as manatees in Mississippi as well. So that's an important note as well.
And how big is your team?
Oh man, we have an awesome team. You guys already got to see our beautiful Vanna White in her PPE gear, but we have several staff. We have many students as well. So we do have Dr. Bloodgood as our staff veterinarian, which is an awesome thing to have. We have Elizabeth Heeb, who is the Manatee Sighting Network manager as well. So when we talk about manatee sightings, she's usually the one that's on these Facebook Lives. And then myself as a stranding coordinator, and we have multiple responders as well. And in normal, unfortunate, not COVID times, we do have a great number of volunteers as well. And we always, we would probably be using this plug to be able to ask for volunteers and that sort of thing. And right now, unfortunately, all of that's on pause because of COVID. So we have a wonderful intern who should be starting this week actually. And hopefully in the future, we'll be able to get our volunteers back in because we have an awesome group of volunteers. You guys all rock. That we hopefully can get in and help with responses and necropsies and things like that in the future. And if you're interested, we definitely would love to hear from you. Just know that we're a little bit on pause right now.
And so with this research effort, I know you have emphasized this, the importance of calling you guys for your expertise in responding and because of legal reasons, but it's also a really important contribution to the research program. So all of those data points that people can contribute, so they're the on the ground eyes, because you guys are a small team and you can't be everywhere out looking for these animals. You really rely on folks to report that information, and then you can respond and confirm and then respond if there is a more so for example with the manatees, you document their presence. They don't just need to be, in some sort of distress for somebody to call you.
We want to know all of them. Yes.
Yeah, so you would be interested in documenting just a manatee's presence.
Correct. Yeah, that's a very good point, and I'll kind of draw back to the person that reported the sperm whale, which again was a historic event for the entire northern Gulf essentially, was just somebody that was out enjoying the day on the boat. So we really needed that. That was a really important call, and even when we talked to them, were a little bit like, I don't know what's going on, but I think there's a really large something in the bay. And just having that idea, that forethought to give us a call and to have a number and to know how to use it. And that's really important. And one of the plugs too that we always make is we care about all of them. So we care about the ones that are like this case where they're live and our veterinarian can respond and do an assessment and that type. We also care about the ones that maybe don't smell very good and have been deceased for a long time. Those kinds of things. We do care about those as well because they're all coming back to this really huge research effort, and those calls are nearly just as important as well.
We have a lot of thank yous.
Oh, good.
A lot of comments. Thank you guys. All.
Well, thank you, Mendel.
It was very informative. Thank you for chatting with us this morning. And just briefly, is there anything else you'd like to say before we say goodbye?
Just we really appreciate all the support during this event. Like we've said probably a million times now, it's a historic event, and we just really appreciated the support during all of it. And we're happy to answer questions, and like we've kind of shared a lot too. There are still a lot of questions, and that's just something that we know going into marine mammal strandings, and that's just kind of going to be a part of it. And we look forward to being able to work with our volunteers again in the future. And you want to say anything, Dr. Bloodgood?
That's perfect. Thank you all so much for attending and for your excellent questions, and we look forward to continuing to do what we do.
And we do have our Boardwalk talks on first and third Wednesdays, and we hope you'll join us for the next one. Actually, Dr. Bloodgood is going to chat with us next time about some of her other work as a veterinarian here at the Dauphin Island Sea Lab. So thank you for joining us today. We hope to see you again next time.